Okay, good evening. And good evening everyone upstairs. First item is apologies. Any apologies?
Councillor Graves.
Councillor Graves, thank you. Yeah. Item 2, declarations of interest. Nice, easy so far. Item 3, minutes of the meeting of council held on the 20th of July. Someone like to move that, please? Yeah, okay. We agreed? Right, announcements from the Mayor. Okay, first announcement, there's a few. There's a late item that has been accepted at 10A. It's a minute from Audit and Accounts. Okay, hopefully you've all had a chance to see that. Other than that, we'll be sticking to the agenda. Second announcement is that successive mayors and countless elected members have been made well aware of the excellent work of the Derbyshire Children's Holiday Centre. Since 1891, the charity has been providing holiday places for children who might otherwise go without. The numbers of places have climbed throughout the 126-year history of the charity, but never more so than in recent years. At the last count, more than 650 holiday places per season were offered by the charity, demonstrating how many young lives in this city and county have benefited. I'm told that figure is still growing. Over the last 15 years, that growth has come about under the stewardship of the charity's chairman, Bill Tomlinson, a trustee of the charity since 1984. Bill is about as dedicated to the cause as they come. His commitment impresses everyone who meets him, but ever focused on the aims of the charity, he is one to deflect attention from himself and turn it instead on generating more income, growing the charity and helping more and more people. For many years, the privilege of selecting a Derby Civic Award winner has been reserved to the Mayor, normally from among those community champions nominees who boast a link to the city. It is not a job to be taken lightly, and adding someone to the prestigious list of previous winners is a decision requiring certainty as to the merit of the candidate under consideration. Rarely can a mayor of this city have been faced with such a simple task, relatively, as it is patently obvious to everyone that this candidate is utterly deserving. I hope that this award is just a small token of Derby City Council's appreciation for everything it has done for our young people. The surprise for me was that he hasn't already received this award. Now, like all the best awards ceremonies, our winner can't be with us this evening. And unfortunately, there's no satellite link to wherever he is. So we'll have to present him with the award at a later date. But just, for now, councillors, ladies and gentlemen, it gives me huge pleasure to publicly announce that the winner of the Derby Civic Award for 2017 is Bill Tomlinson. Thank you. I'd just like to quickly say a massive thanks for the people who volunteered so far to help me raise money for my charities. It has been absolutely fantastic. People volunteering their time, people giving their money, helping with these samosa sales, which have been really, really successful. And thank you to a few people who've put their hands in their pockets. And I believe our chief executive has decided he'll sponsor the next lot. So I'm very, very grateful for that. So thank you very much. It is amazing. I definitely cannot raise the amount I want to raise on my own. So I'm very grateful. Just to say, it's the last meeting we have here before Remembrance Day, the ceremony we have on November the 12th in the marketplace, so please all come along to that. The next thing to announce is item 11. There's been a change under CP53. I'm sure you're all familiar with CP53. Basically,
with an amendment to a motion.
It's an amendment to a motion before we've even had it presented. And I believe there's some sort of cross-party support for this, so we'll come to that later. But yeah, basically item 11 will be different when we get there. And David has asked me to say that we can't display the 5-minute timer thing tonight. There's some IT issues for that, exactly. So you can have as long as... No, you can't. We've got watches.
We tried that.
I think that's it, isn't it? Yeah, that's it.
Mr.
Right,
Mayor,
okay.
Mr. Mayor, since the last meeting, a former member of this council has died, and we normally certainly put that in the minutes. Councillor Dave Kellogg, who was councillor for Spondon from 1979, elected on the same day as me and Margaret Thatcher. And he served on this council for Spondon until 1983. Right. He then went on to do a number of other jobs representing the people of Spondon, but not on the council. So I do think at least it ought to be recorded in the minutes. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, I think, Councillor Wood, we should have a minute's silence. Okay. Okay. Right, item 5 is statements from members of the Council Cabinet. There are none. So on to item 6, questions from the public to members of the Council Cabinet. Hopefully you've all had a response, and I'll be asking you in turn whether you've got a supplementary for the Cabinet members. So, first of all, Mr Bacon, have you got a supplementary for Councillor Afzal?
I have, Mr Mayor, thank you very much. Councillor Afzal, legally, what waste service does the council have to offer to residents from the aspect of recycling if you have chosen to completely remove their ability to recycle in their community?
Good evening, Mr Bacon. As you are fully aware, because we do work closely together in that particular area, but until we see some significant improvements, and as you're fully aware of, because you're working with our public protection officers, and we are doing the engagement, education and the enforcement, and when we do see some visible signs that there are improvements, I'm sure we can come back to this.
Carol Fenton, do you have a supplementary for Councillor Afzal?
Yes, please. I've read the letter here that I've been received, and what I want to know is, how do blue badge holders get recompense on able-bodied drivers that use these spaces? Not about removing them, because at the moment nobody has been able to take the able-bodied drivers off the spaces.
I mean, as I've explained in my answer, I mean, it's quite clear for us to do the traffic regulation order. It's not financially viable. So I would hope that any decent human being that would see somebody who's got a disabled badge would show them a bit of respect. And I think we just need to try to engage with those people and make sure they do show that respect, because at the moment the council is not in any kind of a financial position to bring these traffic regulation orders. Thank you.
Next question from Lynn Lambert. Have you got a supplementary for Councillor Repton?
I'm afraid I don't, because It's rather a long answer. I'm afraid I've not had time to read it through thoroughly yet.
I didn't catch that, sorry. She's not here? Oh, no, you haven't
Yeah,
got
I
one.
am,
Okay.
yeah.
Oh, she's here.
I am here, yeah.
All right, thank you.
The response is a little bit is long.
Okay.
I am here, yeah.
But she's not had time to read the answer because it's too long and then
He hasn't had the chance to read the answer because it's quite long.
Oh, okay. Right. Well, I will... Mr Bacon, have you got obviously you have, for Councillor Afzal?
Don't presume, but on, you know...
I think with you I will.
It's like the well-known one about the bears and woods and things, isn't it, really? Thank you, Mr Mayor. Councillor Afzal, much of the issue of contamination in blue bins stem from bins on streets. If the good work of the CPOs removes the bins from the streets, which will improve contamination levels, surely we should give residents a second chance, noting you do not intend to replace the bring sites.
I think I've answered your question already, Mr Bacon, twice. And the public protection officers, it's an ongoing process, and we will obviously keep an eye on things. If things do begin to improve, we can always revisit this again, but at the moment, not yet.
Ms Fenton, do you have a supplementary for Councillor Hussain?
Yes, I'm sorry, I only mentioned housing visitors as an option. Obviously, that's not going to happen because of expense. But how do people that are living near drug houses can get things sorted out? That's what they want. They want these people removing. But I remember one lady kept a list, and she's got 2 disabled children, live next door, so needles and things are quite easily thrown over to her property. And she'd done that for about a year with this property, and nothing was done because the member of the council said, oh, we've not heard from you for a little while, we'll start again. So we're no further forward now than we were before.
I think we've got comprehensive arrangements in place for those tenants who consistently breach the conditions of tenancy. And we do take appropriate action once it's drawn to our attention that somebody is displaying antisocial behaviour or is not abiding by the conditions of tenancy. We have got comprehensive arrangements in place, and I think going back to the original question, one additional visit a year will probably not add anything to the process of removing tenants who are not keeping to the tenancy conditions. So that's not the answer. But we have got various arrangements with people who deal in drugs, our partners. We refer people to them. And if the behaviour does not improve, we do take action to get them out of that property.
Thank you. And Ms Lambert, if you'd like to, if you've got a supplementary for Councillor Repton.
Yes, I noticed that you say the council and I shall not sign up to any detailed proposal that we feel compromises citizens' health and care. But seeing as there's likely to be more than £200 million shortfall financial gap, how likely is it that you will sign up?
Could you just repeat the last, repeat the question, because we missed the last part, sorry.
Right, sorry. You say that the council shall not sign up to any detailed proposal that we feel compromises citizens' health and care, but given that it's likely to be well over £200 million shortfall in the funding, how likely is it that you will sign up? Because, I mean, it looks to me that with that level of funding gap, then you will be compromising citizens' health and care if it's signed up to at all.
I think the best way I can answer that is really this again is a question for our health colleagues. I guess they would say, and we would also agree, that it is incredibly challenging. I mean, in terms of my general concerns about the funding for our NHS and social care, I think what I would like to say is that I've already written to the Secretary of State, David Millett, expressing my and the City Council's concerns over the perilous state of funding for the NHS and adult social care. I've also written to Jeremy Hunt I believe our best course of action is to continue to properly lobby for the extra funding that we all believe that the health service and social care service actually need. However, I think that the elephant in the room is this, and what the elephant is this: it is grossly underfunded. And I do believe that the whole system, unless there is the proper funding that we actually need, will collapse in the medium and long term. There has been a survey over the weekend from the public, and the public do believe that 66% that they would support additional taxation, support our health services and presumably social care as well. And I would certainly support that. And I think that's what we jointly need to be doing to make sure that the funding is in place, to make sure that the services that we do have are ones that we can be proud of. But the challenges are there for our colleagues, but if there are any further detailed questions that Lynn or her colleagues wish to ask, then we'll certainly get them from the health services. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Right, item 7 is questions relating to Derbyshire Fire Authority or Derby Homes. There are none. So on to item 8, questions from non-council cabinet members. We'll work through those. Yeah, Councillor Rose is not here. So question 8 is Councillor Skelton, do you have a supplementary for Councillor Shanker?
Yes, Mr Mayor. Firstly, Councillor Shanker, I have to correct you in your last statement about saying that we agreed to the proposals back in last November. Actually, looking at the council minutes, no, we didn't. Do you not accept that your current proposals are actually a sledgehammer to crack a nut?
Thank you, Councillor Skelton. Maybe you was on holiday that day. I'm not too sure. I will check the minutes, and if that needs correcting, I will do so. What I will say is our proposals to make our taxi licensing regime one of the safest in the country, I believe, is the right thing to do, and I stand by that. And together, working with the trade and working with operators, we can collectively work together to make sure any policies and procedures agreed by this council and our taxi licensing committee are fully implemented. Thank you very much.
Councillor Nater, do you have a supplementary for Councillor Shanker?
I do. Thank you for your response, Councillor Shanker. Basically, what it is, there's a lot of taxi people out there that are concerned and they feel that they don't really need any more ICT training, as you know. I think basically what they need to operate is a sat-nav or a mobile phone, and that should be ample. But my question was simply, in your opinion, do taxi drivers really need IT skills? I believe they don't. I mean, I think we're putting far too much on them, and certainly the older taxi drivers that have been sort of working the trade for the past 20, 30 years, I just think it's too much for them.
Thank you, Councillor Nater. Again, I'd just like to remind you that these proposals were agreed by full council and indeed by the Taxi Licensing Committee. I am aware that tomorrow officers are due to update that committee, and it will be a matter for that committee to consider and come up with any conclusions that they wish.
Councillor Matthew Holmes, have you got a supplementary for Councillor Afzal?
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. It's my understanding that the administration is going to be setting a budget in December this year, and with that in mind, can you confirm that a budget has been agreed for implementation of LTP schemes in all 17 wards for 2018-19 financial year?
Yes.
Okay, nice and quick. Councillor Poulter, have you got a supplementary for Councillor Afzal?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Councillor Afzal, I can confirm, having had discussions with the management at Trent Barton, in particular the brand manager, that the disruption and delays at the bus station are a major factor in the alterations to the Spondon flyer. But that's a symptom of just the mismanagement at the bus station. Are you aware, and can you tell me why some bus services that use the bus station and operated into and out of the bus station are not currently paying a fee for doing so?
Thank you, Councillor Poulter. I have a letter here dated the 30th of August from Trent Barton, and they don't mention the bus station here or anything. We have had issues with congestion at the bus station, and we have a bus partnership set up. We're all working collaboratively together to address the issues, and as I've mentioned in the answer, we are submitted for a grant, and we're going to improve the situation. But as you are fully aware, Trent Barton is a deregulated bus service that your party, in Transport Act 1985, you deregulated the bus services, so obviously, blame your own government, mate.
Councillor Hudson, do you have a supplementary for Councillor Shanker?
I do, thank you, Mr Mayor. Does Councillor Shanker acknowledge that Mr Christopher Williamson's involvement, which brings about a potential governance matter as he wasn't a member of this council at the time, did not bring about a resolution?
Yeah, can you just repeat that, because I didn't pick that up, sorry.
That is actually a quote off an election leaflet, what is in quotation marks. I'll start again. Does Councillor Shanker acknowledge that Mr Christopher Williamson's involvement, which brings about a potential governance matter, as he wasn't a member of this council at the time, did not bring about a resolution?
I'll try answering it. Thank you, Councillor Hudson. And firstly, can I just thank you again for highlighting the excellent work that our re-elected MP for Derby North does. It is commendable for a member of the opposition to highlight that, and I thank you for that. Chris Williamson has provided lots of advice, facilitated some meetings, which did, as you say, bring an end to the teaching assistants dispute. And I thank Chris for the work he did there. Have you got any more questions for Chris? He does run regular advice surgeries, which you may want to attend. I believe they're monthly on a Friday evening, and we can send you some details.
Thank you. Next we've got Councillor Harwood. We've got a supplementary for Councillor Rawson.
Yes, Mr Mayor, thank you very much. Councillor Rawson, once again, you failed to answer the very question I asked you. I asked you if there'd been any consultation with residents and the business people in St Peter Street. You've not answered that question. So what I've done it for you, like the watering can at St Peter Street for the trees. I have stood in St Peter Street and talked to residents. I've also been, you man being quiet, you're rude. I've also been in St Peter Street and talked to the businesses. Not one resident, not one business
Councillor Harwood, that is the question.
wants this cycle lane. And quite honestly, if you've been in St Peter Street and seen the cyclists come down there,
is there a question, Councillor Harwood?
A serious accident has happened, then quite honestly, it's about time you went and had a look, Councillor Rawson. Councillor Rawson, can I ask you, please, before this is even put into practice, that you do what I've done, have a consultation with the residents of Derby, have a consultation with the businesses.
Councillor Harwood, it's still not a question, is it?
And have a consultation with them, please, and stop wasting £200,000.
Come on, we're going to move on.
Will you do that, Councillor Rawson, please?
Just saying yes.
Thank you, Councillor Harwood, for your question. Let me reassure you that absolutely, as part of the traffic order process, there is absolutely full consultation with businesses and with people affected. I think it is probably worth highlighting, Councillor Harwood, as I don't know if you've actually understood the proposals. At present, any vehicle can travel down St Peter Street before 10 a.m. and after 5 p.m. Cars, vans, lorries, making deliveries, whatever. But cyclists cannot, at present, legally travel down St Peter Street during those times at the same time as any other vehicle can, which, quite frankly, is a nonsense. And these proposals, when they've been consulted on, and hopefully they'll find support, will enable people commuting to work by cycle, will encourage people to do that, and make life a whole lot easier for people who are commuting into the city centre. So let me reassure you, Councillor Harwood, there will be full consultation. Thank you.
Will be. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Ralston, I'm sure you'll give us a question for, who's it going to be? Councillor Afzal.
Very presumptuous, Mayor. Thank you, Mayor. It's not quite the answer that I was hoping for in relation to an actual ward-by-ward breakdown, and despite your efforts to try and cover the majority Labour wards in Flowers to make this city more electable, will Councillor Afzal give assurance that now that we've finally closed off the 15-16 accounts, and hopefully 16-17 come December, that which both hopefully show a surplus, that come spring next year, all wards will be given an equal and fair funding element of the budget, please. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for your supplementary. But if you look at the answer that I've given you, where the locations are, these are the major routes in and out of the city centre. So it's not just for our residents, but it's people coming into Derby and going out of Derby. So the fact that you're coming back to the same old story, Labour wards, as they're responding is not Labour ward, is it? It might be, we don't know. But if you look at Palm Court Island, you know.
17. Councillor Barker, do you have a supplementary for Councillor Afzal?
I shall try, Mr Mayor, I shall try. Councillor Afzal, the Antisocial Behaviour and Crime Policing Act of 2014 brought in these public space protection orders. The Act says that Council may make an order on reasonable grounds and gives two conditions. And those two conditions are quite simple. One is persistent and continuing nature of a disorder, and the other is detrimental effect on the quality of life. You will know, of course, that Derby Telegraph ran an article some time ago whereby they got 100 city centre businesses to, in actual fact, object to the situation in St Peter's area relating to the drug problem. But that, of course, is not the only thing that this Antisocial Behaviour and Policing Act covers. What I'm asking, quite simply, is the Act came into force in 2014. We are now in 2017, and we are not putting PSPOs in order or in the council until, it says here, November of 2017. What the hell have you been playing at in the interim?
Well, thank you very much for your statement, Councillor Barker. It's this administration, we do actually recognise that there is antisocial behaviour, and every law-abiding citizen has got the right to walk around the city centre without feeling intimidated or threatened. And we are doing the best we can with the legal advice that I'm getting at the moment. So it is frustrating. I can understand people are frustrated, but we have a statutory duty, and that's exactly what we're doing. So hopefully at the next full council we can all agree to it and get on with it after we've done the statutory consultation first.
Okay, please can we have actual questions rather than statements? No pressure. Councillor Smale, have you got a question for Councillor Raju?
I have, Mr Mayor, thank you very much. Councillor Raju, thank you very much for your response. Just would like to ask, do you not think with the information that is provided in the information packs, the timeframes that is required for the volunteers to come forward and implement this process, and the potential sacking of 40 plus staff, don't you think it's time that we go back to the drawing board on this and have a look at how other options are to running the libraries in the city? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Smell, for your supplementary question. We have started a process. A couple of days ago, Monday and Tuesday, we started community discussions and briefings It would be silly to halt that process. I think we need to give it a chance, and all I would do is urge you to get volunteers from your ward to come forward. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Potter, do you have a supplementary for Councillor Rawson?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Mr Mayor. Thank you for your answer, Councillor Rawson. In relation to the risk, it is understood that security work may have to be undertaken at the Waterford feature. If so, can Councillor Rawson outline both the rationale and the expense of this work? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Potter. As my answer says, officers have been in contact with the company concerned and are seeking to meet with them as soon as practical to explore the possibilities of them taking on responsibility for the maintenance of the waterfall. In terms of safety, there has been an incident involving one of the bid rangers, which has led to this being looked at. And in terms of the cost, I'll get back to you on that.
Okay. Councillor Willoughby, do you have a supplementary for Councillor Shanker?
I do. Thanks for your answer, Councillor Shanker. Just to say on both of your responses to your questions, I'm bringing these questions to because I like to say all the people attending this full council meeting to hear the answer. So my supplementary is, how could this money, that 1 million you mentioned, that provision for 1 million, have been better used to serve the people of Derby, such as keeping libraries open, staffed with full-time paid employees, or providing money for all neighbourhoods of Derby, which are two such examples?
Thank you, Councillor Willoughby. It really is disappointing, given the statements made at previous full council meeting. All councillors here collectively have a responsibility to the Audit and Accounts Committee, and we've got cross-party members on that committee who need to hold the accounts at that committee and scrutinise them thoroughly. It's disappointing. You've admitted yourself, you know this information from your role in the Audit and Accounts Committee, yet you've decided to bring a question here for political purposes to the full council. It's a very serious committee, that of the Audit and Accounts Committee, and I suggest you take that role seriously, or, like I've said previously, ask your group leader to replace you on that committee.
Councillor Grimmadell, have you got a supplementary for Councillor Rawson?
I have, Mr Mayor. Thank you very much indeed. I mean, the Labour response to problems in the city has so far been terrible, actually a disgrace, and totally unacceptable to the citizens of Derby. Good evening, Councillor Rawson. Regarding the Cathedral Quarter proposals to combat antisocial behaviour, can you please inform Council which additional points you would adopt from their proposals to combat antisocial behaviour? Thank you.
Well, thank you, Councillor Grimmadale. I don't agree at all with your analysis of the situation. There is undoubtedly an issue, and Councillor Afzal's spoken a little bit about it in terms of the Public Space Protection Order, which this administration is working to introduce. There are a wide range of measures that we use that are listed in the written response to your question, all of which are supported by this Labour administration. But I would say, Councillor Grimmadale, that this isn't just an issue for Derby. Towns and cities up and down the country are currently experiencing similar problems as a result of people using spice, black mamba and other drugs. Indeed, the Conservative MP for Amber Valley was complaining about the same issue in Ripley. I do think that your own government really needs to take a look at some of the national issues in terms of supporting people with drug and addiction problems and mental health issues, and maybe you could usefully take that up with some of your ministers who are in a position to do something about that.
Councillor Skelton, do you have a supplementary for Councillor Russell?
Yes, Mr Mayor. I was a little surprised at your answer, Councillor Russell, because schools and parents are being told the opposite. But my supplementary is, will you therefore publicly make it crystal clear that children and young people will get an EHCP based on the outcome of proper assessments and diagnoses?
Good evening, Councillor Skelton. Thank you for your question. I have repeatedly, publicly, privately, verbally and in writing offered you the opportunity to come and speak to me or to the Strategic Director of Children and Young People's Services about the issues that you have purportedly got from people that come to you with their concerns. You raise these issues in this full council meeting, yet you never, ever take the opportunity to speak to me about these cases that you tell me are there. So how on earth are we supposed to help children and young people when you don't bring them to our attention? Now, the issue at hand, an EHCP plan, as you are well aware, is based on need and not on the educational establishment that a young person receives education from. They are based on need and not the school that that young person goes to. As simple as that.
Councillor Nater, have you got a supplementary for Councillor Hussain?
I do, Mr Mayor. Thank you for your response, Councillor Hussain. I'm sure we're doing a lot in the city to look after the homelessness, but actually talking to the people both at work and as a volunteer stint I did over at the Stage House project at St Dortmund's Church. These people are quite clear about one thing, that they're basically lacking address and a housing issue it is. What they're saying is they need an address, so for say 3 months where they can get onto the benefits system and start cleaning them up. I'm aware of all the complex issues and I also am aware that we are doing as much as we can for them. But
Councillor Nater, is there a question coming?
But do you agree with me that we need more housing provision for homeless people?
I definitely do agree with you, Councillor Nater, and I think we do need to build more houses, and we've been asking the government to pump more money into developing more houses. And obviously, if the shortage is overcome, the homelessness situation will ease. Obviously, I do agree with you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Hudson, do you have a supplementary for Councillor Shanker?
I do, Mr Mayor. Can you confirm that this Labour administration rejected an invite from the government to be a pilot next year?
Thank you, Councillor Hudson. I'm disappointed you didn't ask the supplementary question that I suggested. The Council, as it says here, are continuing to work with the Cabinet Office. Our monitoring officer is actively involved in that project to support the Cabinet Office and use some of the practices that we've developed here in Derby to be rolled out nationally. I do welcome your opportunity again in asking your supplementary, so I can just make it clear for the record. Earlier today, I've authorised our monitoring officer to seek recompense for the £27,000 that it's cost this authority to rerun a by-election. And remember, there's 3 sitting members of this council who signed them dodgy nomination papers. So we take electoral fraud seriously, and it's on record. We've successfully prosecuted a former member of council who's ended up in prison for electoral fraud.
Okay, we'll move on. Councillor Barker, have you got a supplementary for Councillor Shanker?
Well, yes, I have, Mr Mayor, but first and foremost, I need a personal explanation under CP65. You know what that one is? Yeah, CP65. The question I submitted...
Jamie does.
Yeah, the question I submitted was actually to Councillor Banwait as leader. But I see on the paper the answer has come from, presumably, Councillor Shanker. Now, I find that somewhat disturbing because Councillor Shanker, of course, is the chair of the Standards Committee that sent the letter to Councillor Banwaite. So, I think there's a bit of a conflict of interest there. So, can we clear that one up before I ask my supplementary? That's the start.
Yeah, Councillor Shanker.
Thank you, Councillor Barker. Questions, as you're well aware, asked at full council are asked of portfolio holders around the responsibility that they hold and not to individual members of the council.
Okay.
Right, in that case, Chair, having had that explanation, I've now got the question.
Go on.
That was under CP6, right?
Yeah.
The Standards Committee format, which every person in this room signed some years ago, gave the authority for sanctions to be given to the leader, not to the portfolio holder. The sanctions that were sent to the leader. If he is incapable of making a decision in relation to those sanctions, shouldn't he resign?
Councillor Shanker, wasn't it? Councillor Shanker.
Councillor Barker seems really interested in the workings of the Labour group. And I'll just, to make it quite clear publicly, a referral from the Standards Committee, a cross-party committee of this council, has made a referral to the group leader. It's now a matter for the group to determine that and report back.
Okay, you've got the answer. So, Councillor Willoughby, you've got a supplementary for Councillor Shanker.
I do, and I hope he'll actually answer the question this time instead of making a statement. What does the Cabinet member think of this adverse conclusion from an independent external body in terms of stating the terrible way in which this Labour administration is misgoverning this city, providing no effective governance mechanisms within the council, and therefore showing that Derby taxpayers can place no confidence in them to provide value for money from the finances to which they've been entrusted?
Again, another surprising question given your position on the Audit and Accounts Committee, Councillor Willoughby. I only need to refer back to recent elections. Derby taxpayers obviously put a lot more faith in us than you guys, and that's why you're sat where you are and we're sat where we are.
Councillor Nato, you've got a supplementary for Councillor Shanker.
Yes, I do, Mr Mayor. Thank you for your response, Councillor Shanker. I actually thought this teaching assistants dispute would put to bed and would actually sorted it out. Speaking to still a lot of assistants, clearly they're not very happy at all about what's been going on. So your response, basically, are you saying now that this matter has been resolved, or is it still ongoing?
Thank you, Councillor Nater. The previous dispute has ended. There was an agreement signed by myself, the Chief Executive of the Council, and indeed by Unison. As you're aware from recent press announcement, there are ongoing issues which we are determined to continue working with Unison and our valued TAs to resolve as soon as we can.
Next item on the agenda is item 9. Can we have some order, please? Otherwise, I'll have to just clear the gallery. Item 9 is the annual report of the Standards Committee. Councillor Shanker to move. Councillor Shanker, do you wish to move?
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to thank all members of the Standards Committee.
Can we have some order, please?
I'd like to thank all members of the Standards Committee. This report highlights the work done in the 2016-2017 municipal year, and I'd just reiterate the comments made in the forward. It's disappointing the level of complaints that appear to be coming through to the Standards Committee. Some of those are obviously politically motivated, but as we've stated previously at full council, we think there is a need to review our standards regime, and we're trying to do that as soon as we possibly can.
Thank you. Yeah, we made it. Yeah, we will, I'm afraid I'll have to clear the gallery unless there is some quiet. We need to conduct the business. Thank you. Councillor Bayliss, do you wish to speak?
Yes, Mr Mayor. I wish to make a personal statement for Council today. Under CP 42, I wish to move a motion without a notice without motion, subsect R, which means I'll be able to read my statement with the 5-minute time limit not in force. But as the technology is not working, that's not such a problem. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Well, that's fine. Well, Councillor Bayliss did ask me before, and I did agree. Obviously, we don't want to abuse it, but thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr Mayor, for allowing me to make this statement. I do so with some regret, but I thought I ought to bring Council up to date with the Standards Board process. I and 8 councillors have just been through, and the particular process that 2 of us were subject to, taking over a year and being very costly for this council. I'll spare you the first 51 pages of the report I've been sent, but on page 52 it says, and I quote, "Our findings is that there has not been a breach of the Code of Conduct of the authority concerned," and that's in relation to myself. I was sent this report on the 5th of July, which is 1 year and 4 days after the special council meeting we attended at the request of the then Auditor Grant Thornton. The process of the complaint was, to say the least, tortuous and unnecessarily long. I did actually offer to refer myself to Standards Board myself, but I was told that wasn't possible, something frankly I still find a little bit odd. There was some debate over the procedure and the fact that 8 councillors referred to the monitoring officer, who said that she could adjudicate in 6 of the cases, but not the relation to 2 of them. I'm of the opinion now, as I was then, that the internal adjudication should have been for all of us or none of us. The consequence of the complaint was the leader of the council who made the referrals had to come up with not only the charge, but the evidence to support the charge. Now, I know the leader always looks after himself, and he thought by doing this he could be above politics, but that only works if everyone believes him and his motives. The evidential process took from July 2016 to just before Christmas 2016. Why? Because the leader of the council did not write the charge or assemble the evidence himself. It was way beyond his ability. It was done by professional officers and the council's lawyers as directed by the monitoring officer. And just before the recorded hearing this year, there was the investigating lawyers, a further evidence pack was supplied to me. I was on holiday at the time, so I didn't receive it until the morning of the hearing itself. This council went to absolutely extraordinary efforts to demonstrate I was indeed at a cabinet meeting in 2011 when the original Webhelp deal was agreed, when I was the then leader of the opposition. For me personally, the process has been not without cost. It's something the chief executive here had to refer to, of the authority here, to refer to my current employer as part of the vetting process. That could have had serious consequences for my employment and my reputation, something I accept that only I take seriously in this chamber. The cost of the investigation, was reported to me at the time, was over £79,000.
Mr Mayor, sorry to interrupt, but under CP 64, could I address a point of order, please? Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm new to the Standards Committee this year, but I'm certainly under the impression that the matters that Councillor Bayliss is referring to are still subject to the investigation and have not been brought, the result of those investigations have not been brought to the Standards Committee to this point. Is it therefore appropriate for us to hear a statement on those investigations, on those allegations at this point, or should it come to Standards first and a decision be taken in respect of the allegations before we hear such a statement? Thank you, Mr Mayor.
the information in the public domain.
Okay. Yeah.
Mr Mayor, Councillor Poulter is correct. The matter has not been formally referred as yet to the Standards Committee, and that is in discussion with the Chair of Standards at this moment in time. However, Councillor Bayliss is expressing his right to give a personal statement to this committee, and it's his decision as to whether he chooses to share information at this stage or not, pending the meeting of the Standards Committee.
Under the same CP, what is the purpose of standards then? If this is going to be debated and we're going to hear statements about this here, what is the point of having a standards committee to hear such things and to be ruled on such allegations? Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Bayliss.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. As I say, the cost of the investigation was £79,000, and in all likelihood is more than that, because I'm not certain the point I asked the question, the final bill was in. And certainly it does not include Derby City Council officer time. In my opinion, the money could have been better used to spend on other council services. But if this complaint had gone through the DCC standards process, then likely as not there would have resulted in a split on party lines, and then I and my fellow councillors would not have such a clear verdict where teams of lawyers and retired police investigators looked at these cases and found no evidence of wrongdoing. In fact, in the Grant Thornton report, I got the impression the auditor did not like what had happened, because not even with the active assistance of officers of this council find any actual evidence of wrongdoing by myself or Councillor Russell. It's my understanding the auditors are due to report any wrongdoing to the appropriate authorities, up to and including the police, but in this case did not choose to do so. Why was that, I asked? Because there's no actual evidence of any wrongdoing. The two items that made up the charges I faced, refuse workers pay grading and web help, I just want to put into the public domain that the issue of the possible pay grading irregularity was identified by officers in their sore thumbing process to flag anomalies in the pay line process of the now discredited Aquarius model. The issue that was spotted by officers was that the pay grade into which refuse workers were being slotted was potentially subject to a pay reduction of 25%. Officers were asked to provide a solution at this point to this sore thumb, which they'd flagged up, which they did. This is agreed with, that the assimilation was applied to the pay grade, was acknowledged that the length of service for the council employees. There were a graduated number of points at which the assimilation could be added into the calculation, and for memory we chose the value in the middle of the options. This is applied to all workers in that pay band, not just refuse workers in that pay grade. To apply this solely to refuse workers, as in the media headline, would have been negated the whole equal pay process, as the pay line would have been compromised. And this was actually noted in the public interest report, paragraph 67, page 16. It was on officer advice that the assimilation rules regarding the service length were added into the mix to resolve the issue. This is agreed consensually, as noted in the first line of paragraph 67 in the public interest report. At no point did I receive officer advice that this was not a lawful decision to make, nor a misuse of council resources or an unusual HR practice. Those allegations only surfaced after the failure of the Aquarius contract when officers were being investigated for their dereliction of duty. Officers spotted a problem at the time, suggested a solution, and then that solution was agreed and acted upon. The public interest report found no contemporaneous evidence that I'd advised on officers that did not heed, nor did the investigation post the PRR report find any wrongdoing. In fact, to be fair, it was said at the full council meeting, the 1st of July, council held it at the 2-hour 11-minute point into the meeting that the Hay contract resolved this anomaly, grading a similar cost. So it may be reasonably being supposed that the Aquarius model may have flawed in relation to the pay point at that time, hence being spotted as sore thumb by officers. Web help. I was not responsible for ensuring the legal advice was sought. This was and always has to be up to officers. I made a decision based on the report from officers which contained the requirement that officers sought legal advice, and that decision would not contravene EU state aid rules. In fact, we'd been approached to do a similar deal a year before, but Webhelp had not secured the business at the time. And as we were rerunning the process we had done the year before, and there was no evidence that we could not do so, it did not ring any alarm bells for me at the time. Why would it? But if I'd been made aware of the issue, I would have instructed officers to find a solution as the time was of the essence, and the creation of 800 jobs was the imperative, which was, as it happens, lawfully achieved. I did not allow the resources to be misused or act illegally. I acted on offered advice and made a decision based on that advice. But in relation to those two issues, I want to point out to Council a number of things. No councillor, or councillors for that matter, has ever brought a motion to this council as a standalone item or proposed as part of a budget process that either of these issues be unpicked. Why was that? If you wanted a council to unpick the pay solution for refuse workers, I could suggest you pop down the A38 to Birmingham first and see how that's going for them. And I point this out to the points made by Councillor Hassel-Ralston at the time. They were keen at the time to implement the officer solution. Or if you want some more history of that, look back what's happened in Southampton, Brighton and Leeds in the past. No one unpicked this because it was a fair and right and proper thing to do. We're supposed to provide service of the citizens of this great city, through our leadership, provide solutions to problems before they become an issue for the public and be an exemplary employer. You have to contrast this with what happened to the city after they stepped down from the leadership role. And on Webhelp, well, the contract has grown, so there are 1,200 people now employed. It's been cheaper to a new supplier, so I don't see the sense in going down to Prior Park to Webhelp, demand our money back, and telling all those people they're sacked. That's just nonsense. On both these points, if anyone is idiotic and proposed to be unpick what was done, I would argue and vote against it. I think the process that we've gone through is clear that there was a public interest report with no evidence to support the accusations made. Further note, we get yet another Section 115 officer in post. Is that to do with the advice offered by Grant Thornton conflicting with the advice now offered by Ernst Young? And if so, are we due compensation in the future, I ask? And what of the previous Section 115 officer, close relationship with Grant Thornton? I'll leave that one for now, but because it's for others to ponder, not me. In my view, the standards process in the council is flawed and not fit for purpose. And if we had not had these complaints from the public interest report, then we'd have to look at it before now. I think we do need to do that urgently, as the only process we currently have, and until it's replaced, all the recommendations need to be adhered to and acted upon by members of this council, all members of this council. For the record, Mr Mayor, I did ask for an apology in writing from the leader of the council. So far I've had a verbal apology, and I guess that's because I was going to make this statement at council. So, Mr Mayor, thank you for allowing me to make this personal statement and plead guilty to preventing the possibility of the refuge workers striking by being fair to them and guilty of creating initially 800 jobs for this city. But then I always thought a good leader should be able to lead, spot issues, solve them, put the city first, and be someone that earns the respect of people across the piece, be they our staff, the council's partners, and even concert goes. But that's just my view, and I would say that, wouldn't it, Mr Mayor? But thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Bayliss. Right, so there's no vote required.
No, just accept.
It is.
Move to accept the annual report.
Oh, Councillor Pegg. Councillor Pegg.
Yes, Mr Mayor. Excuse me. No doubt if you've read the report, you will see on page 11, it clearly refers to me as when I was the Mayor. And I was found guilty or asked to write a letter of apology to the organisation concerned, which I did. I also asked that the letter not be made public because there was things in that in relation to my family. But sadly, one member of their organisation, who's now over on that side of the fence, who used to be on that side of the fence, chose to show the letter to Councillor Graves. Councillor Graves then puts a Freedom of Information request in, asking for the letter. He then goes and publishes the letter, or gives it out to be published in the press and in another mismanaged media organisation that not worth mentioning. But funnily enough, he's been asked to write a letter himself and apologise, but he's not done it. And he's also the leader of a party. So it just makes the Standards Committee at this point in time a bit of a farce, to be quite honest with you. And I do think something needs to be done far more with regards to the way the Standards Committee works. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Poulter.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I thought this was about the standards report, but hey-ho, we seem to be running into a series of statements of personal explanation in relation to complaints against people. Councillor Shanker, I agree with you in that this report is what it is. It's for 16-17. You acknowledge that the standard system in the city needs change. We've had some discussions on that. The explanation I've had for that not being tackled so far is that there are outstanding complaints, serious outstanding complaints, some of which have been referred to already, and we shouldn't do that until those have come to standards. My argument is that if it needs change and if it's not right, then we should get on with the business of reviewing the standards process, change it if necessary. When those complaints come, we deal with them under the rules and regulations of the previous standard committee, the standards committee as it is now. There's absolutely no reason for delaying a review of the standards procedure. But that's my first point on that. In relation to the content of that, I'm interested, surprised that the members have chosen to highlight the complaints against them in this arena, but it gives me the opportunity to invite, being as Councillor Banwaite hasn't dealt with the issues alleged against Councillor Nawaz, perhaps he'd like to take the opportunity of making a personal statement to explain why it is that on three occasions now he's inappropriately interfered with the workings of the Taxi Licensing Committee in the way that other members have done tonight. So, Councillor Nawaz, do you want to issue a personal statement?
Councillor Shanker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I thank for all those members who have felt it necessary to make personal statements here today, which constitutionally, obviously, they are allowed to do. In relation to Councillor Poulter's comments, reiterating what I said earlier on, and in fact we said it at full council in 2016, I believe, that we'd look at the standards regime of this council, because there is obvious room for improvement. It is, as I said earlier, being abused by a number of members itself, let alone other individuals who are putting in spurious complaints, which aren't really complaints. It's to get a cheap headline in the media. And we're looking at that, and I want to do that collectively with a cross-party group that we have on standards. It would have been absolutely inappropriate had we started doing that review whilst a number of serious complaints were ongoing. We would have just been accused of meddling the system to try and fix some results. As these complaints are now being concluded, full council has my total commitment that we will review our standards regime. Everybody is welcome to contribute and come up with ideas on how they feel that should be done, and we hope to have that concluded before the next municipal year starts, if not sooner.
Well, I'm told there's no vote required, it's just for noting, so we will move on from item 9. You'll be glad to know. Item 10 is the annual report of overview and scrutiny. So I believe that's Councillor Stanton to move. Is it?
Very briefly, just to say, we can basically move it as printed, that's absolutely fine. Would like to tell everyone in the gallery that while this might be sometimes the worst example of local politics here in Derby, I will say that overview and scrutiny is often the best, and if you want to have a true reflection of how things are discussed in a reasonable and adult manner, and there's less, not none, but less political point scoring, then do come along. Tuesday nights are fun.
Again, once again, that's just for noting, so thank you very much. We'll move on. So we're taking the late item 10A now. Councillor Hasselgrave.
Mr Mayor, fellow councillors, at the last full meeting of Council, the oversight of the action plan addressing the Section 24 recommendations was devolved to audit and accounts. The committee has well and truly taken ownership of the document and has relentlessly and urgently sought reassurance that the plan is being followed and that there is no slippage in the timescales for delivery. I shall deploy everything in my armoury to gain assurance that any fixes in accounting procedures are long-term and robust fixes. I'm pleased to announce that the accounts for 2015 were signed off yesterday. The Council is on track to have the 2016-17 accounts presented and signed off by the end of this calendar year. These accounts will inevitably contain some adverse reservations as an overhang from the now completed 15-16 accounts, but all the work being done around both these late accounts should place us in a very good position for when the accounts for this current financial year, 2017-18, are submitted, and it is expected that these will not be met with any adverse judgments from our external auditors, Ernst & Young, whom I thank for their work in getting us in a better place with the authority's accounts. The committee has also done some work on mapping out all the relevant issues and topics we should take before us during the civic year. This has resulted in the addition of several extra meetings of the committee during this year. We shall also incorporate training sessions prior to items of the agenda which require this. We are a very busy and focused committee with very important matters to deal with. One thing I would like to add is that the current narrative playing out in the media on historical accounts is that it was under this administration that the problems in valuations came to light, and this administration took the whistleblowers' concerns very seriously and reported these to the external auditor. I must make it clear, it is us who reported to the external auditor, it wasn't a finding of the external auditor. The problems had been deep-rooted in valuations for many years across quite a number of administrations of almost every political complexion. This administration has dealt with this, and the message to all who work for the council and have whistleblowing concerns is that they will be listened to and taken seriously. This will lead to an even more open, healthy and transparent culture within the authority. I shall report at length on our work as a committee at a later full council meeting, and I would expect that this will become an annual occurrence during the civic year. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Hasselgrave. Councillor Ralston.
Thank you, Mayor. I suppose it's through gritted teeth we ought to congratulate Councillor Shanker for making sure these accounts have gone through when Councillor Ranjit Banwaite was unable to do so for the 3 years. However, in all realistic terms, the congratulations actually goes to the members of the council, the hard-working members of staff who have managed to pull this out of the bag, the workers, senior officers, Janie Berry, and interim Section 151 officer Mark Taylor. They are the ones who have pulled this all together, as well as the teams within the council, so our thanks goes to them. As a committee, we are trying to work together and we will progress it. We are trying to work cross-party to make this happen because the interest for me is the city and we've got a lot of work to do, but we are under no illusions. The reality is that 15-16 accounts was a mess. It cost us £1 million to sort out. 16-17, we aren't out of the woods yet. I very much hope that there is less to uncover, but that is through crossed fingers. And we should be under no illusions. It's not a foregone conclusion that 17-18 is going to be any better unless we as a committee and as a council make sure that our governance, our accounts and everything is done properly and efficiently going forward. So party politics aside and everything else, although I'd love to see Ranjit hang up his hat and admit to his defeat of the fact that he was unable to produce any accounts during his time in control of the Audit and Accounts Committee effectively. We need to move forward and hopefully going forward we can achieve that. So once again my thanks goes to those officers and members that have actually made that happen. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Willoughby.
Yes, I'm echoing the words of my colleague on the Audit and Accounts Committee, Councillor Ralston, but obviously signing off the 2015-16 accounts is actually only the first stage. There's still quite a lot of outstanding issues that need to be addressed. For example, the accountant's conclusion of this adverse value for money conclusion, and as also we still need to close off just a few and finalise a few of those Section 24 actions as highlighted in this agenda items. And there are obviously still those related issues with governance and control in the conclusion of the independent auditors that need to be addressed as well. As I've said at the Audit and Accounts Committee when we've been through these things, I'm concerned that this progress is sustained. Mark Taylor, the temporary 151 officer, has done a sterling job in getting these accounts through, and we should pay tribute to the work that he's done in leading the team. But his contract, as he keeps telling us, finishes in December. So we need to make sure that we urgently go and appoint somebody permanent, a successor to him, who can drive this through and sustain this. And I'd like to assure everybody in this chamber that I clearly take my responsibilities on this seriously. As Councillor Ralston will confirm, I've tabled loads of questions on the accounts, and I'm actually waiting a response to some written ones from the 151 officer. So clearly I'm on a committee where I'm actually on top of my brief. However, in contrast, as sadly highlighted tonight, the Cabinet member responsible clearly is not. The auditors have highlighted the clear concerns which have been brought out with governance and control that fall directly under his remit. However, in response to my questions, to bring these to the attention of the attendees of this meeting, with press and public here who may not always, although it's open meeting of course, might not always attend the Audits and Accounts Committee, he's not provided this committee this info obviously, and his essence, just stuck his fingers in the ears and sort of insulted me for almost answering the questions. So he's therefore demonstrated on this and other issues that he clearly is not in charge of his brief. Therefore, in the words of one of his responses to my questions, I think of the two of us, he should be the one going to his group leader and tendering his resignation from his cabinet post.
Okay, Councillor Matthew Holmes, please.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. It's no doubt that the Audit and Accounts Committee needs to be robust, and I believe that it certainly is moving forward. But I don't agree with Councillor Hesselgrave's sort of attitude that it's plain sailing from here on in, because it isn't, because underlying the big issue here is the governance issues within this council. They've been there for a while, some historic, but some more recent. And I would say this administration, I've said it before and I'm going to say it again tonight, this administration, this Labour administration, is just failing to take seriously the governance issues. You need to do that. You talk about open and transparency. That needs to be in place, because you're never going to have robust governance that this council needs while you have overt political control at all levels of this council beyond what is expected of a political administration. And I think, Councillor Banwaite, you look like you're not going to be saying anything again for the second time in a full council. I hope you're writing a few things down to actually prove me wrong. But I think it's fairly disgraceful if you are going to go through this full council without saying anything. That's no leadership. And I think the Labour, the group, they're falling to bits. Tonight we've seen further cracks emerge with regards to your leadership. And I have to draw the conclusion that we're not going to move forward as a city until either you go or your administration goes.
Okay, there's no vote.
There's a vote to accept.
Is there a vote, please?
Yeah. Is to receive them, so yeah, you can move on, you don't need a vote now.
No. Again, it's just for noting, so we'll move on from that on to item 11, which is amended already. Okay, everyone's got a copy of the amended motion, item 11. And we're taking out with those, aren't we?
We're just...
CP53 says with the consent of council, so that's what checking everyone's happy with the change.
This has been amended through CP53. Is everyone happy with the change? That's what I've been asked. Oh, okay.
Yeah. It's been given to all groups, it has been circulated.
And we've got to... Okay, without any objection to CP 53, we'll move forward with this being the substantive motion. Councillor Banwaite.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you to my colleagues on the Tory benches. Mr. Mayor, the electrification of the Midland Main Line campaign has gone through a rollercoaster journey, or more appropriately, as one of those frustrated train journeys that you take that stops and starts. I think the best way to highlight the emotional journey that we've taken on this campaign is through a number of articles which I've managed to dig out online. The first one, from the Rail Forum East Midlands, dated September 19, 2013, and I quote, "The electrification of the Midland Main Line between Bedford and Sheffield is planned for completion by 2020, with the Derby leg done the year before. It is part of government's £500 million plan to have electric trains running between London, St Pancras and Sheffield. Confirmation of the funding followed the Derby Telegraph's our Electrify Our Line campaign, run with the help of the Derby and Derbyshire Rail Forum, which represents more than 100 rail-related businesses in the East Midlands. The aim was to ensure the Midland Main Line electrification was included in the government's transport spending plans for 2014 to 2019, announced in July 2012. An independent report compiled by an engineering consultancy has estimated that electrification would benefit the East Midlands to the tune of £450 million, including £35 million for Derby. It would also create and safeguard hundreds of rail jobs. The average journey time of 93 minutes between Derby and London would be cut by 9 minutes. The electrification has been a long time coming. Soon after, Network Rail, Midland Main Line Improvement Programme, put an article out celebrating this news and saying, "We've started the biggest programme of improvements in the Midland Main Line since its completion in 1870. And it talks about the key benefits of electrification. Enabling electric trains to operate on the Midland Main Line will mean more seats, less track maintenance, faster trains. They produced a map, and I've got a copy of it here, and I've just highlighted, you've got the full route and you've got the centre, Derby. And if you fast forward, Mr. Mayor, to 20th of July this year, and I have a Derby Telegraph article written by the journalist here, Zena Hawley, and it says, "Minister U-turn on rail electrification 65 days after telling Derby people it was on track to happen." And I quote, "Just over 2 months after telling the Derby Telegraph that he wanted to see electrification of the Midland Main Line happen sooner rather than later," and that's the Minister's own words, Transport Secretary Chris Grayling has controversially pulled the plug on the £1.1 billion project. Mr. Grayling was on a pre-general election visit to Derby North in May when he spoke very enthusiastically about the electrification process, which would have seen the line electrified through to Sheffield. And the article goes on, and I quote, "He also said he wanted to see new trains replace," and I quote, these are the Secretary of State's own words, "smelly diesel as soon as possible. But his latest announcement appears to contradict this by saying that instead, modern" trains will be used, which can switch from electric to diesel mid-journey. Mr. Grayling explained the current situation, electrification, as of May 16, and said that work had started on the electrification and was very much programmed to continue if the Conservatives won the June 8 election. I also have an article of the Melton Times, just to show you this is not just an issue for Derby. And the heading is, plans have been scrapped to electrify railway routes in Leicestershire. And that's dated 21st of July. And there's a quote from a Conservative leader, Leicestershire County Council leader Nick Rushton, said, and I quote, as to his disappointment and the importance of electrification, full electrification of the Midland Main Line is essential to deliver on the aspiration to integrate into with the network so that the full benefits of HS2 can be realised across the Midlands. The decision not to electrify the region's Midland Main Line tracks was also criticised by the Midlands City of Trade. Their chief executive, Scott Knowles, said, and I quote, "Not that long ago we were told that the Midland Main Line would be electrified all the way to Sheffield. This would improve services because electric trains accelerate and brake more efficiently than heavier, and the enhanced operation would give scope for more services to run. Then electrification was paused because of the cost, then unpaused, but now seems to be off the table altogether beyond Kettering. The bi-mode trains that the government now appears to favour will be heavier than existing stock because they have two power trains, accelerate more slowly and take longer to stop." So, Mr. Mayor, it is disappointing that we find ourselves here talking about this issue. We have debated this before. Our local media, credit to the Derby Telegraph at the time, and they made a point of celebrating their campaign and the achievements. I'm sure they also felt when the Secretary of State came to see them during the election campaign, as a number of other high-profile politicians and dignitaries. I won't call that comedian, that distasteful comedian that I think talked about asking Conservatives to vote in Chaddersden. But certainly the politicians that came, the Telegraph were, I'm sure, felt that they had secured a firm commitment from the Secretary of State. But now, from this Secretary of State to make it a political issue, to say if we were elected, and clearly he was campaigning here in Derby North, to say to the people of Derby North that you vote for us, we'll make sure this happens. We've already given a commitment, but we commit to doing this. Mr. Mayor, that commitment is now in pieces. This government has been exposed for playing politics with this important issue. They play politics with a commitment that they've given to this city, communicated through the local media. And that is the worst kind of politics, to make a commitment, and manifest a commitment in that way for an election and then completely backtrack. And it's clear that all the experts are saying that the alternatives that the Secretary of State is now boasting about simply will not give us the same benefits as electrification of the Midland Main Line. And there's a bigger problem at play now here, is a lot of effort has gone into securing HS2. It was essential that HS2 should never be at the expense of electrifying the Midland Main Line, and clearly the government has bigger priorities in terms of funding. Could it be that this funding is now being redirected to shore up this inept government after its failure in the general election? The money being redirected to Northern Ireland. Now, not that that should be an issue. We are part of the United Kingdom. But clearly, to play those kind of politics, having fought a poor election, having seen a reduced majority, and then to use that very valuable funding that potentially was going to come here to this region, now to go towards political deals that have nothing to do with what's at stake and what's genuine the interest of the residents of this city and the region. And clearly the government has in the past found money for other regions of the country. We've seen how Surrey Council, one of the richest regions in the country, found itself claiming that they were cash strapped and celebrated the fact that they were able to secure hundreds of millions of pounds out of this government. So again, it is another example of the lack of a fair deal for Derby City. And I do call upon this Conservative group. In the past, they've made it clear they don't believe in fair deal for Derby. They believe in austerity. They've voted for it. That's why you support the Conservatives, because you believe that austerity is a good. You believe that public services are fat and overfunded, that they should be cut down to size, that there should be fewer police on our streets, that there should be reduced council services, that there should be fewer hospital beds. That is the impact of austerity. That's not scaremongering. That is the facts. You've got to, if you continue to vote for the Conservatives, you've clearly got to believe that is the direction of travel for public services in our country. But surely this is a step too far. We were hoping, we were praying that we would get the Midland Main Line electrified. It was a cross-party campaign, and the Conservatives have lied. It's an opportunity now for the local Conservative group to finally come out and say, this is an issue where this city is not getting a fair deal. And I call upon the Conservatives, particularly, because it's they who are in government at this moment in time. But I also call upon the Liberal Democrats. They supported the government up until, obviously, the elections. But we have an opportunity now to start a new campaign. And hopefully the local media, and I look to the Derby Telegraph, because in spite of reporting their disappointment that the Conservatives had done a U-turn, we're yet to see a citywide campaign to lobby this government for a fair deal and to electrify the Midland Main Line. So, Mr. Mayor, there's a lot at stake here. The regional economy is important. If we're going to drive investment and growth and future jobs, it's absolutely crucial that we improve our strategic transport links to the rest of the country. And I call upon Council to support this. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Rawson, do you wish to speak now? Or?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do hope that we can get cross-party support on this motion, in hopefully unanimous support, as that has been achieved at East Midlands Councils on a cross-party basis, and also D2N2 and the East Midlands Chamber, because this is an issue that affects all of us across the East Midlands, regardless of party. The government's decision to scrap the electrification of the Midland Main Line is, I'm afraid, a snub to commuters across the East Midlands and will hamper our regional economic growth. Despite years of promises to the contrary and endless prevarications from ministers, the Secretary of State has cancelled planned improvements to the line between London and Sheffield. Upgrading the Midland Main Line was expected to cost around £1 billion and would have delivered faster journey times and cleaner trains for roughly 5 million people who live in and around Derby, Nottingham, Leicester and Sheffield. Instead, the line will receive slower, more polluting bimodal trains and a 70-mile gap in electrification between Kettering and Clay Cross. I think it's worth saying, Mr. Mayor, the bimodal trains are unproven technology. They're not operating anywhere in the UK as far as I'm aware. So it is a massive risk to go ahead with this untried and untested technology. As a local authority, we're being asked by the government to introduce a clean air zone, which is good. That's the right thing. We should be promoting and making sure that we have clean air. And there's that expectation that the council will do that. The government themselves have announced that there'll be a ban on sale of diesel cars from 2040. And yet we're being asked to countenance the continuation of diesel trains moving up and down the Midland Main Line, creating that pollution and being extremely detrimental to the environment. Councillor Banwaite's already mentioned the commitment during the general election campaign from the Secretary of State, who told the Derby Telegraph that electrification would happen sooner rather than later, only to see that disappear just a few weeks later. So that is incredibly disappointing, Mr Mayor, and does undermine public confidence in government's ability to deliver transport investment. And I think we have to say, Mr Mayor, that that's happened under governments of all colours in recent years. The decision is an example of investment in regional infrastructure being neglected while funding is pumped into London and the South East. And I don't think anyone would disagree that as the nation's capital and with a large population, London needs investment in its transport infrastructure for things like Crossrail. But the imbalance is so great that projects in the Midlands and the North just don't get a look in. Over the last 10 years, London's received £15 billion of investment from Crossrail. Now the Secretary of State's looking at a further £30 billion of investment in Crossrail 2. And this comes at the expense of electrification schemes across the Midlands, Wales and the north of England. And the national economy is disproportionately weighted towards London, and this infrastructure investment should be used to mitigate the disparities, not exacerbate them. I think, Mr Mayor, passengers could be expected, or will be expected, to foot the bill for higher costs of operating and maintaining bi-mode trains if this decision goes ahead. The new trains may provide a boost in capacity, but they're short-term and doesn't provide a long-term solution for the rail network. Faster journey times from electrification would allow businesses to expand into new markets, to allow people to access jobs further afield and take advantage of those economic opportunities and bring money back to invest in Derby's economy. The HS2's plans, the government's plans for HS2, if we're to make the most of that and to have to make the most of some classic compatible HS2 trains that can run on not only the new HS2 line but also on existing lines, we do need to make sure that that electrification can happen to take that into account. I'll leave it there, Mr Mayor, but I do urge all councillors to support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Marshall.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd just like to reiterate as well what you said first off about Bill Tomlinson on the Derby Children's Home as well. Fully support that it gets an award. That was also one of my charities for much needed holidays for children. Going back onto the motion, I fully support the motion. I mean, the general motion put before us, obviously, money's been taken out of the area. The initial motion that was put forward was all about really political point scoring. So I very much appreciate this new amended version, and I didn't really want to amend the amended version because of time. So, but the points raised, you know, you can't argue with it really. You know, we've been done by it. You know, we've been had by the money situation. So I mean, I very much hope that, you know, we get full cross-party support on this. You know, it's important that, you know, I recall during my mayoral year when we were debating on the Bombardier contract at the time. You know, when we all got together, we was out marching. You know, and it got national attention. So I think, you know, rather than bickering and making political point scoring on this particular situation, I think we all should get behind it, fully support it, and hopefully we'll get a full house tonight, Mr Mayor. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Repton.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I think hopefully there will be cross-party support, but it is important that we debate this properly and we look at the real problems that the government's decision has forced upon us. The Conservative government's decision to scrap the electrification of our Midlands and Northern regions demonstrates very clearly and sadly that the North-South divide is alive and well. A recent IPPR North report found a derisory 3.2% of UK transport spending is invested in the East Midlands, whilst London receives 17 times that amount. £221 per head in the Midlands, £1,943 in the capital. So this latest announcement to cancel the electrification to the Midlands and the North is a real body blow to us in Derby. It's a sad case of back to the future with antiquated 1980s technology. Whilst the government wants diesel cars off the roads within 2 decades, it is to foist the same polluting trains on us here in Derby. Diesel trains that are polluting, expensive and slower than the electrified trains. Tens of millions of pounds already spent on bridges for electrification wasted. And now we wait for the controversially expensive HS2, which is to be funded by Theresa May's magic money tree in a number of decades to come. Here in Derby and the East Midlands and the North, we cannot wait. We need electrification and we need it now, and I hope we get behind this motion and support it tonight. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Anderson.
Just try and work out how to use my chair. Thanks. I'd just like to probably take a slightly different tone. I think that this motion very clearly is about the economic future of our wonderful city, but as importantly, the economic future of our region. Successive governments, as my colleague Councillor Rawson rightly pointed out, have neglected this great region. And, you know, I say this as a self-professed arch-Blairite. You know, we have been ignored as a region when it has come to funding decisions. And I think that there is a very real disconnect between having a very fast train line run through the county up further north and actually having a very, very efficient rail system running from Derby, from Sheffield through Derby and then down to London. And when I was a London commuter, Mr. Mayor, I took great pride in the fact that I would get on a train station in Derby, sit on a train that was made in Derby, and get out at a station that was built by workers from Derby. Not many people know that about St Pancras, but that line is our line as a city. And, you know, I'd like to take a bold step in praising the leaders of all parties for being willing to put aside any kind of party politics to actually vote for this, because this is about our city. And the reality is there's a silent majority of voters out there who actually really just want to see people in this chamber working together on economic solutions like the electrification of the Midland Main Line. Because that is something that will affect this city. We can start with the trains being built in Derby at Bombardier. Let's hope so. Let's hope that happens. We can talk about all of the local businesses who will be involved in the electrification process. We can then talk about the extra revenue that it will bring into the city with better connectivity to London. But also, I think, you know, we should, at some point as a council, perhaps go a step further. With so much money being spent on projects like HS2, maybe we need to ask for them to look at the rail links within the county and the region itself. Because currently it's a source of embarrassment that they're planning to put a very fast train which will have a station nearby in Towton, when currently rail connectivity between Derby and Nottingham is so poor. And I think that, you know, we can do better as a region, and we must be calling on whatever government, and I will admit I do hope that soon it changes, big time, but whatever government we have, we need to be asking them to make sure that they're investing in this region and make sure that they're taking our aspirations as a city and also as a region seriously, because we need economic growth. We need opportunities for young people coming through our fantastic education institutions, and we also need Derby to become the city that we all know it should be. Thank you.
Councillor Kerr.
Thank you. In terms of process, I just thought it would be worth highlighting that there were 2 motions tonight about Midland Main Line, and the second one, obviously, is one that the Liberal Democrat group put in. And I really appreciate the way in which there's been cross-party working on coming together with one set of words, taking out a lot of the very party political words from the previous version that we have in front of us and being able to add in some additional words. So I think that shows really good cross-party working prior to this meeting, and I appreciate that. We have obviously had some more political speeches, and I'll just mention in passing that it was the coalition government with a significant Lib Dem input that put the electrification back on the agenda in 2010 to 15. And if we were there, it would still be there, because it is important. It doesn't just tick the boxes of being lower running cost and better air quality. It also ticks the box on moving to lower carbon. Our electricity is getting increasingly low carbon. We must act on climate change. And it also helps on our balance of payments, because our diesel, by and large, is now being imported. But we can make our electricity in the North Sea, on our land, on our roofs. And the more we move in that direction, the more we are becoming sustainable. So the direction the government has gone in is not that sustainable direction. What they are doing is transferring the cost of investment from the government onto the users and operators of the line. They are saying you can pay more to drive a less efficient bimodal train. You can pay more for a long time, forever, until we get that electrification. So instead of the government investing in British civil engineering, it means the population, the travelling population, have to invest in imported diesel. And that is not something that I support either. We have higher running costs, higher rolling higher rolling stock costs, and we have, just because we won't invest now. And the reason the government has given is that they don't want the disruption. They're going to be kind and not disrupt our line to London. But the longer we wait, the more the pressure will be on that line. The longer we wait, the more difficult it will be when we finally get around to doing it. And that is why we need to be doing it now. And as part of that, as people have said, it isn't just working here in Derby. This is in fact, it's a cross-country campaign. It's not just the East Midlands that's suffering. The North is suffering. Wales is suffering by this pullback from doing electrification. And we need to work for our line with our partners here in the East Midlands and up to Sheffield. And in fact, places like Bedford, people from Bedford want to travel north, for God's sake. So let them travel on an electric train north from Bedford. They might want to come here, they might want to go to Sheffield, they might want to go beyond. Let's get our network electrified. Most of Europe is electrified. Bimodal trains do exist. They manufacture, and Hitachi manufactures them in Italy. But Bombardier, as far as I know, don't manufacture them in Derby and probably never will, because they have plants elsewhere that are already doing this work. So if we're going to continue to have British trains built in Derby, travelling on the line to London from Derby, we need to get this working, and I really support cross-party action on this.
Councillor Bayliss.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The issue about electrification of the Midland Main Line is as important to this city as indeed the Bombardier campaign. It's quite right, in the past we've had the support of East Midlands councils and before that EMDA. It's absolutely essential we do this, because we talk about the Midlands engine, but it's not a very good engine. You haven't got the decent locomotive and line to run on. The issue for us is very simple. It's been promised in the past by others and failed to deliver. We need to make sure we hold this government to account in terms of its promise and make the case that it's absolutely vital for our economic development and the city to go forward with a fully electrified Midland Main Line. There are lots of good reasons, and what we need to do is use the opportunity that we had in the past of campaigning from Bombardier. It's been mentioned by Councillor Marshall that we did an excellent campaign on that. And I actually remember having a conversation with a guy called Philip Hammond, who was Secretary of State for Transport at the time, talking about Bombardier and investment decisions. And he actually said to me that it was our government, the Labour government, who made this, that got this wrong. And he said that it was Mr Hoon who got it wrong, Jeff Hoon. Now I said to him, that's fine, Minister, but it's your job to get it right. And if you think we got it wrong, then say so, be bold enough, and I'll support you on that. And I think we need to be in that mode. We need to make sure that we are campaigning at cross-party. I do seem to remember a certain Philip Hickson standing next to a certain Bob Crow, which I thought I'd never see in my lifetime, on the Cathedral Green. And it's the right thing to do in terms of the campaign for Bombardier, and it's the right thing to do in terms of the campaign for the Midlands electrification. It's vital to us and vital to our economic interest, and we need to do it in a cross-party way with all our partners, wherever they may be. And I commend this motion to Council. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Carr.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. When I was an apprentice at the railway, we were building diesel trains to run from horrible heavy diesel multiple units to run from Bedford to St Pancras. And then while I was still there, they started electrifying that line. And I thought, we're going to get it eventually. Then they electrified the East Coast Main Line. Did we get it? No. Then recently, and when the coalition government was in, they said, we're finally going to get it. And I thought, hooray. And now Mr Grayling has, in my view, shafted us. I would go further. I would actually say it's only about 20 miles, 30 miles perhaps, from Sheffield to Wakefield, where the wires start again. If they electrified the whole thing, we'd then have an integrated network, because you could get them from Leeds back onto the East Coast Main Line, all on electric trains. And that would remove a huge, what's the word I want, problem with diesel fumes. And if anybody who's been on St Pancras Station when they're idling those trains down there, they'd know what sort of a problem we have with air quality. Let's get on and press the government into electrifying the Midland Main Line. Thank you. Oh, sorry, I should just add, they've already spent millions of pounds on infrastructure improvements which will be necessary for electrification, which will now be wasted unless they get on with it.
Thank you. Councillor Potter.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm withdrawing my speech. Thank you.
Councillor Poulter.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. At the beginning of this debate, Councillor Banwaite got a very generous round of applause welcoming him back to the chamber, and a contribution from him. But I have to say, I think that might have been withdrawn now, because we're a little bit disappointed with his contribution. The point of this The point of this motion for me is that I had hoped to be able to congratulate him on what's probably the best written Labour motion that's ever come before this council, because the content is such that it's sensibly written, the rhetoric's taken out of it, it's written in a format that any minister, when it's presented to him, should sit up and listen to, and it's well meant in that what's important in this debate is not the politics, as described by Councillor Repton and Councillor Banwaite in this situation. It's about what's right for Derby and what's right for the East Midlands. It's not about a fair deal for Derby. It's about not looking back at how we've come to this situation. What we should be looking for is what's going to happen going forward. And I had hoped for sensible contributions, and I have to say, Councillor Anderson's and Councillor Bayliss' contributions, I certainly totally agree with, and I wouldn't criticise any of that contribution. We have to, as a city, do the right thing, and it's been referred to in relation to Bombardier. We did the right thing then, because that was what's right for the city. Not for the Conservative group, not for the Conservative Party, what's right for this city, which is why we as Conservative councillors are in this game. So what we need to focus on now is not the politics, but we can. I was at the East Midlands Council with Councillor Rawson when we heard the debate and the argument on why this decision should be reversed. It was agreed. The leader of Leicestershire County Council fully agrees that it's vital that the East Midlands Main Line is electrified. We all agree with that. So what we've got to do, and we can do it, same as we did with Bombardier, we can put our heads together, come up with a viable, sensible, apolitical argument, a business case, repeat the business case that's been put forward previously, and get this decision reversed. We're more than welcome the opportunity to join in on that basis, and that's why we can agree, having had that sensible conversation with members of your party today, we were able to agree the wording of this motion, and we will be supporting it. So let's forget the politics on this one, please. Let's get on with making an effective lobby and changing the Minister's mind. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. I've got 4 more speakers, and I'm not going to take any more after that. So there's Councillor Ashburn.
Thank you, Mr Mayor.
This will be fairly brief. There was a demonstration on Saturday the 9th of September supporting the electrification of the Midland Main Line. The Liberal Democrats supported this on the train and in Leicester and Derby, alongside Chris Williamson. The government has already spent £20 million on changes to the infrastructure in preparation for electrification, which will be waste if it doesn't happen. The purpose of this motion is primarily to press the government to electrify the Midland Main Line to the benefits of residents and businesses all along the route, not to make party political points. I hope that councillors from all parties can support it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Evans.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll be quite brief. I've worked in railway electrification on the design of it, the 25 kV, on and off for the last 25 years, including the link to the Channel Tunnel, Birmingham Cross City, Great Western Electrification and the North West Electrification Programme more recently. I've seen the benefits it brings. It's huge, and the Midlands is being neglected, and we need to stand together and make a stance here, and I fully support the motion. Thank you.
Councillor Williams.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I would like to read you all a quote from a gentleman called Philip Hickson from 2011, and it says, "The government have simply got things wrong. We are not afraid to say when they get it wrong. We are not afraid to fight for Derby, and I'm really proud to say it sounds like we have got cross-party support. So let's get together, let's do this, let's fight for Derby."
Councillor Skelton.
Right, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Williams, for just what you've said and for a number of other people and their contributions. It probably was at the time of the Bombardier issue, perhaps a little surprising to some of us that Philip Hickson, a very political animal, rose to the challenge and was very much statesmanlike. And I commend him very much for that. He did the right thing for the city. And it's now come again that we have what might be called a Bombardier moment. We really all need to get rolling our sleeves up together and, if necessary, getting down to London like we did with the Bombardier campaign and mean business, and we're just not going to take no for an answer, and they need to know that. I was recently talking to Vince Cable, and he was obviously reminiscing a little about his time as business secretary when the Bombardier issue was live. And he still remembers us in Derby, so I'm sure Philip Hammond also does remember us as well. So we made an impact, is what I'm saying. So we need to make an impact again. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And finally, to sum up, Councillor Banway.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to thank all the parties, all the contributions we've had have been extremely useful. I think the next stage is, as you know, we've said the electrification campaign is back on. Let's capture the Bombardier spirit that was so successful back then, and let's come together with the support of the rest of the city, and we look to our local media also to get involved as they did at the time. And I've already said to the Chief Exec, let's convene a meeting of the group leaders and all their nominees so we can draw together, agree together a structure of a campaign and then go ahead and implement it. So I'd like to thank all my colleagues for their contributions, and let's get on with it. Thank you.
I'm just going to move to the vote. All those in favour of the motion? We think that's carried. Thank you. Right, thank you very much. We'll move on quickly to item 12. Councillor Eldred.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. 2018 will mark the 100-year anniversary of women's suffrage in the United Kingdom. In 1917, after a long and sometimes bloody campaign to secure votes for women, the House of Commons finally passed the Representation of People Act by a majority of 385 to 55. The bill then made it through the House of Lords, despite our very own Lord Curzon, who at the time was president of the National League for Opposing Women's Suffrage. You learn something every day. No, they do now. The 1918 Act gave women over 30 the vote for the first time, provided, of course, they met certain conditions, one of which I will never meet. Fast forward 100 years, and there is no doubt women have made great strides towards equality in all aspects of our lives. But as the recently published report from the Fawcett Society highlights, in terms of representation in local government, we still have a long way to go. So, how bad is it, brothers and sisters? The numbers speak for themselves. Nationally, only 33% of councillors are women. Fewer than 1 in 5 council leaders are women, and around 30% of cabinet posts are held by women. None of the 6 recently elected Metro mayors are women, and only 1 in 4 directly elected mayors are women. Black and ethnic minority women are shamefully underrepresented in local government, as are younger women and women with disabilities. The vast majority of councils also do not have maternity, paternity, parental or adoption leave policies in place for councillors. And what about here in Derby? The situation is sadly no better. Out of 51 councillors here in Derby City, only 12 of us are women. We've only ever had 1 woman leader of the council. We hold only 22% of cabinet positions, and only 4 out of the 13 member-led committees, not including cabinet and full council, are chaired by women. Labour are in fact the only political group in Derby doing anything to address these dreadful statistics. We have all-women shortlists for selection in certain seats, which of course encourages and supports women to stand and become councillors in their wards. I was selected on an all-women shortlist when I stood in 2014. So, why does it matter? Is it really an issue? A question that I was asked by Radio Derby last week when I was interviewed on this motion. Well, hopefully in the 21st century, we actually don't need to ask that question. And if we do, then our brave suffragette sisters will be turning in their graves. Does anyone really believe that women shouldn't be equally represented at the table when decisions are being made that impact our lives? Shouldn't the question actually be, why are there so many men in local government in the 21st century? As local councillors, the policies we determine and scrutinise, the services we influence and the budgets we set all affect the women in this city on a daily basis. We have a responsibility to make sure women's voices are heard and that our issues and concerns are on the agenda and addressed. We also have a responsibility to ensure that the decisions we make take into account the perspectives of women from all backgrounds, and that this chamber truly represents the fabulous diversity of the people of Derby. So, let's think, what could be the barriers to women's participation in Derby? Sometimes I think coming along and watching a meeting of full council. But speaking from personal experience, the lack of formal maternity leave provision and returning to my cabinet role when my twins were 3 months old was incredibly hard. I joke about doing radio interviews whilst changing dirty nappies and feeding twins, but it was tough. And that is despite the fact that I had and do still have amazing support from both my Labour comrades and officers. And the fact that in the early days there was never any shortage of volunteers in this building or in this chamber willing to hold, cuddle, feed, walk about or do all manner of things with a twin during meetings to help me be able to concentrate. I can imagine that some women might be put off by the comments made previously by a member in this chamber on a number of occasions, suggesting that a pregnant woman isn't fit to take on a leadership role. Or when an issue is made on social media about me bringing my son to a meeting in the chamber, calling it unprecedented. An unnecessary and, for the record, quite untrue comment. My children often join me for meetings and events both in the ward and here in the council house. Not only is Theo an expert with a litter picker, after having received his training, of course, I joke about the fact that in the 3+ years that I've been a councillor, he's actually been to more meetings than some other councillors in this chamber. The insinuation that this is somehow wrong is not only bang out of order, but actually could well put off women with children getting involved and becoming local councillors themselves. I think we need to reflect on our electoral cycle and how possibly that discourages women from taking up leadership positions. With elections 3 years out of 4, how can there be any stability when you take up a position of responsibility which would take away from either your family or force you to give up possibly other paid employment? The timing of meetings, access to suitable childcare, the culture in this chamber, and the image of local politicians could also all be factors. Or it may simply be that women can't get involved because there are too many men in this chamber already. The report from the Fawcett Society highlights the fact that incumbency disproportionately benefits men. Amongst councillors who have been elected for over 20 years, men outnumber women 3 to 1. The report states that at the current rate of progress, it would take 48 years for women to reach equal representation, which in my book is far too long. So it might be time to consider radical changes, such as quotas or even term limits to speed up the pace of change. Ultimately, women will only achieve equality if men relinquish some of their power and control. A cross-party working group would provide a unique opportunity to look at all these issues, look at the barriers to women's participation in Derby and come up with new and creative ideas to support more women to become Derby City Councillors and take up leadership positions. Some of these ideas we may be able to implement locally, some may require broader change at a national level through legislation or policy. Either way, by working together, I believe we can effect meaningful change and change the way this chamber looks so that we have more women sitting here to make decisions that affect our lives. I urge you to support this motion.
Thank you. Councillor Russell, do you want to second?
Yeah, I formally second the motion and reserve my right to speak, Mr Mayor. Thank you.
Councillor Ralston, please.
Sorry, Roy. In 2016, Theresa May became the the second UK female Prime Minister after Margaret Thatcher in 1979. The Conservative Party is the only political party to have secured a female Prime Minister, not just once, but twice. Can Labour really claim to be the party of equality, of feminism, of stamping out sexism when they failed to elect a female leader at any point in their history, let alone in the national history, or locally? She wasn't elected, she fell in. Anyway, if I may continue, my understanding, following my research via the Oracle of Information of Derby City Council's political history, Mr Councillor Robin Wood, is that there has only ever been 2 female group leaders elected here in Derby, a Lib Dem and the current Conservative MP, Pauline Latham. In fact, in 2016, the most recent elections, we had all three of our Derby Conservative parliamentary candidates were female. But no political party is perfect. And here in Derby, quite rightly pointed out that we as a group only have 3 female Conservative representatives. As local councillors, our attention should be focused here in this chamber. I'm personally happy to encourage more women to consider being part of Derby City's democratic process to create a more balanced and fairer representation of society. And I'm sure cross-party will agree that attracting new members, whether they're female, male, disabled or from a variety of ethnic backgrounds, when they have to come and witness this lot, is a challenge. The most valuable trait to anyone wanting to become a councillor isn't any of those things. It's their passion to improve Derby, to make our schools better, to support those who need our help, from dog poo and dustbins to looked after children and the city's economy. I don't look around this chamber and see females or males or different religions. Here in this room, I see that the majority of people have a genuine care of the city. However, I fundamentally disagree with the idea of anything like a female shortlist. We wouldn't as a society accept an all-male shortlist. We'd consider that a little off-call. I wanted to be elected firstly on my dedication to the city and the passion I have for my ward, a better, safer and more pleasant place to live and work for my family and me. At no point did I think I should be elected just because I'm female. We need to tackle the real issues here in relation to the low number of female politicians in Derby. The truth of the matter that one of the key issues is the pay gap in the UK, which means that in general more women stay at home looking after families in general than the men. Despite popular belief there isn't a lot of money in local politics, we need to make the role of elected members more appealing in other ways. I'm happy to contribute to a working group to do that. Many councillors here have a day job, and in addition to this role brings difficult demands on members' time and dedication. As a female with 3 young children in school age, the role actually fits around me and my family pretty well. I love being a councillor. It gives me flexibility, it gives me a challenge, it gives me variety, and most of all, an inspiration to do better. So by all means, let's inspire more people to get involved, have their voices heard, give a wide variety of political opinions, and most importantly, let's get people involved in politics for the qualities that they can bring to the city, irrespective of being male or female. But I do support your motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ashburner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Lib Dems do not do all women selection lists. We simply choose the best candidate. If the other two main parties...
You're not supposed to lie in the chamber.
If the other main parties did the same, then perhaps we would have better councillors. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Eric. Councillor Banlake.
Yeah, I think those comments take us back many, many decades, but let's bring us back to where we are and the eloquent speech that my fellow councillor, Councillor Eldred, has made there. I think the first thing is saying that, clearly there's a lot more that needs to be done, and we'll come on to that. But, this administration has done a lot to champion the profile and the rights of women. Just this year we've had the Women's World Cup cricket, and I'm proud to say that the winning England women team started their journey here in Derby. And that has done great service to promoting the role of women in national sport. But clearly this is about politics. And I think it's worth just talking about how this administration has tried to break certain barriers and create some new records. We've had, certainly when I became leader, we've had more women on the cabinet, and in this council's history we had 3 women on the cabinet. Lisa joined that cabinet at the time, together with Sarah Bolton and Councillor Russell, and in fact Councillor Russell is, I think, one of the youngest cabinet members in the country, or certainly was at that time. And I can also say that I had one of those defining moments. And a lot of people think that I have other defining moments, especially in the opposition. But actually, I look at one of my defining moments, of certainly in terms of my character and my values, when I looked to, as you do as leader, to appoint the cabinet. And I remember in 2015, I decided I was going to appoint Councillor Eldred, because I liked the work she was doing, her enthusiasm and passion, and her ability. So she came into the office, and I sat down and I said, Lisa, I'd like to appoint you to the cabinet. What do you think? And she says, I'm grateful, but I need you to let you know that I'm pregnant. Now I like to think I answered that question very, very quickly, because I had a short window, and what I could have said could have ended badly, or could have ended many numerous ways. I didn't say, oh dear, oh dear. My answer was, that's great news, and how is that going to? Are you okay to manage your responsibilities? And the answer I got back, that's not a problem for me. And on that basis, she was appointed. And I think that conversation probably lasted about 30 seconds, if I look back now. And as a result of that, I was very proud, and I think most of this council was very proud of the fact that Lisa assumed her cabinet duties and responsibilities while she was carrying twins. And that was, I think, a great example, a promotion of the role of women. It was obviously disappointing then a certain party, and it was UKIP, and it needs to be said there, that the leader of UKIP party, and some of their supporters are in the gallery, made great criticism of Councillor Eldred being pregnant and on the cabinet. I took that criticism personally because I had appointed Councillor Eldred, and I like to think everybody in this council chamber were appalled by the constant attacks on Councillor Eldred. There weren't just attacks on Councillor Eldred, they were attacks on, you know, the role of women in politics, the role of pregnant women in the workplace. And I think that, you know, probably sums up what UKIP are about and what their supporters are about. And I hope the electorate, you know, do see for them what they are. So, Mr. Mayor, we've had a really eloquent speech. You know, it is a Labour group motion. And I like to think we'll get cross-party support. And looking over here, I think Councillor Graves not being here is probably a positive contribution, because I think Councillor Evans is indicating probably leaving UKIP now and distancing himself from those type of outdated medieval view about the role of women. So women do have a very powerful role to play in politics. We've seen the history of that. But, you know, this administration, this Labour administration, is about social justice. It's about treating people all equally and fairly. And, you know, I think this is a really golden opportunity to continue the work that we've already done into profiling the important role of women in sport, in the workplace, in business, and now in politics. And I can't think of a better person than Councillor Eldred. And I have to say, you know, in terms of Yvonne as well, you've been a long-standing councillor in this chamber. I think that we've got the nucleus of a really good team. I think also it would be useful to have, you know, a man on that team as well, because I think it's an issue that we're all passionate about. So let's take this working group forward and get some really good recommendations.
Thank you. Councillor Webb.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Politics and women. A dangerous combination, some might say. But if we look at Derby City's workforce, we have a very high percentage of highly skilled and professional female officers. And some have made it to the really top level of officership within this council. And that is due to us having promotional opportunities ingrained within our HR policies, and we have equal opportunities policies ingrained within our HR policies. So there is opportunity for development of female officers and male officers and any in-between genders within this council. The recruitment policies are similar. And it is us who appoint, and I mean we as councillors, who appoint those senior officers. So we need to look at ourselves when we talk about establishing women within the workforce. The first MP elected to the Commons in 1918 never took her seat. She was a member of Sinn Féin, as Councillor Wood has just pointed out. But the first lady appointed to Parliament was a lady called Nancy Astor, Viscount Astor, and she was appointed in 1919. And she and Winston Churchill are famous for their banter at the time. Two particular quotes I will give you at this time. Nancy Astor, Winston, you are drunk. And Winston Churchill replied, Madam, you are ugly, but I shall be sober in the morning. Nancy Astor, to Winston Churchill, "If you were my husband, I'd poison your tea." The reply from Churchill, "Madam, if you were my wife, I'd drink it." Banter like that in the chamber can be amusing, but some of what we see in here is not. As Councillor Ralston has said, we had 3 female candidates within Derby at the general election. We've had 2 female prime ministers. There are opportunities within politics for women, but there are new challenges. Those challenges: social media, stalking, trolls, vandalism and aggression. And there is a list of the number of MPs, culminating in Joe Cox in 2016, that were actually killed in the line of duty representing their communities. Parliament recently debated abuse and intimidation of candidates at the general election, where concerns were raised about abuse and safety of candidates. A report in the Derby Telegraph showed how close to home this had occurred. We will not attract more women into politics unless it is safe for them to do so.
Time, William, sorry.
I can't see the
no,
time.
We're doing the timing here. Sorry.
Unless it is safe to them to do so. And it is our duty to take the lead.
All right. Okay, Councillor Stanton, please.
Sorry, Roy, but I can assure you it did feel like at least 5 minutes. I'm going to try and do this. I wasn't going to speak on this motion, and then I was moved to do so, because I feel quite strongly about this. I've known a lot of young women who are very passionate about politics, young women, old women, lots of women who are passionate about politics, really dedicated, would be fantastic, and when you even mention the idea of standing as a candidate, they go cold in the idea. And I've never quite drilled down on all the reasons why, but I don't think we have all the answers yet, and I think some more practical ideas of what we address and how we start on that is a great start. I think in terms of the idea of women, women and young families and childcare and things like that, these are the expectations that we push on to women, and we do it through all industries, and it's not just in politics. It is through the judiciary, it is in the media, it is on boardrooms, and we can't have this whole idea that 50% of the population, just because they're genitalia, can't rise to the top. Right? And we can't cite 1 or 2 examples of this person's broken through the glass ceiling and say that's enough. It isn't enough. It isn't enough, particularly in politics. It isn't enough when our industry of politics, more than any other, should be representative of the population of people we seek to represent. So yes, 50% of the people in here should be women. And I've heard it slightly from Councillor Rawson and slightly from Eric, and even Councillor Smale, at the very suggestion of an all-women shortlist was, we don't do that. Our selection is based on ability. Well, I'm not sure whether everyone in this chamber can really look at themselves and go, yeah, we've got the best of the best in here, that's what Derby's got to offer, and it just so happens that this 51 are the 51 of the top brightest in Derby. I'm not sure that's the case. Well, the new Councillor Rawson, you are. So I actually think all-women shortlists, no, I don't like all-women shortlists. I don't like affirmative action. But until we have actual representation that breaks through the prejudices out there in the electorate that are historical, that have those arcane things like a woman's place, or deal with those, until we have that, we have affirmative action, and we do make a difference. And we put people in a position where they have the ability to show and to demonstrate that actually this isn't women's work, that's not man's jobs, there aren't men's jobs and women's jobs or jobs for people on race, colour, creed or sexuality. There's just politics, and we all care. That's the only criteria you have to be here, to get on, care and do the work. So I know we have a member standards group that is coming, and that may be a practical vehicle through which that we can identify some of the smaller, softer items that can maybe allow us to make sure that anyone feels comfortable in being a councillor, in standing up in this chamber, in playing a role as a local councillor and serving their community, because that's what it's all about. And whatever we say is currently, we're failing on that, and we could do more. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Matthew Holmes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just briefly, I think we are going to be supporting this motion. I think I would probably just put out there one suggestion, which I think will really start this cross-party working group off on the right foot. We talk about politics, that's what we're here for, but I think that the party politics is the thing which we need to remove. And I would suggest that, agenda item 1 on the first meeting of the working group should be to work to remove the party politics in this discussion as we move forward. Because I think that's going to be a hurdle. If we remove that, and those in that cross-party working group are just councillors first and foremost, it doesn't matter which party you're from in that discussion, in that arena. Let's do that, and then we'll move forward. It shouldn't matter at the end of the day whether we're trying to encourage more conservative councillors to be women or Labour or Lib Dem or whatever. On this issue, definitely, we need to remove that party politics from that discussion within the council. And I think if we do that, that will set the right foundation to move forward, and the council can come up with some positive actions to hopefully have far more representation from women within this chamber in the short term and the long term as well. And we can see future leaders of this city as well moving forward, because we have a lot to offer as a council. We don't see it as a career, because politics, very few people survive long term in politics, certainly at this level, and it's never really meant to be a job. It's a vocation. It's you do it for the right reasons for your community. And I think if we approach it in that way and be very open and transparent and not on party political lines, we will then be on the right foot. And I think that then further down the line, obviously that kicks in as to which party, or no party at all, that they may want to put themselves forward through the various selection processes, which are always going to be different. There's never going to be parity between the parties in terms of how the local associations or whatever mechanism the Labour Party have for selecting candidates. So that's what I'd say, Mr. Mayor, is if we can at least have some, the cross-party working group has no politics within it initially, I think that'd be a really good thing.
Thank you. Councillor Skelton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think there's been a very interesting discussion we've been having so far. I think it would be very useful to have this cross-party working group, and I would recommend as well that I think the LGA obviously have done a certain amount of work on this already, so we need to get hold of that information as a starting point. There's been numbers of theories, I suppose, put forward as to why women do and don't go into politics. I think, as Councillor Stanton said, sometimes you ask women, why don't you'd make a great councillor, why don't you? And there's then this reluctance that creeps in. I think women generally tend to feel that politics is rather a macho culture, and I would have to say that is certainly true. I've certainly been on the receiving end of intimidation, bullying, etc., etc., some of which I had to go to the police for. Fortunately, it then stopped, and that was from other councillors, not members of the public. I can't say I've ever had any problems with members of the public. But these are the sort of things that women notice, and it's not acceptable. Mocking of people, things like that, just because you're a woman, or you get it far worse than a man would get it. Those are the sort of things that have got to stop. Reporting people maliciously to Standards Committee, say, or something like that, just because you want to intimidate them. Some man wants to intimidate you. those sort of things are totally unacceptable and have to stop. So, you know, through groups or whatever, that has to be made absolutely crystal clear that that's got to stop. The culture in this place, and obviously in other council chambers around the country, has got to change. So I think that needs to be certainly very much on the agenda of the cross-party working group. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Russell.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've got some serious mixed emotions after that debate. I'm encouraged to see that the vast majority of members in the room are going to support the motion. The sadness is that firstly it's necessary, and secondly that some members have made some rather bizarre comments about the motion as it's printed. Councillor Holmes's comments about removing party politics, I understand where he's coming from with that, I do. But the reality is, you know, firstly, party politics are what defines us as groups. And actually, we all hold very different views. I know my views are very different to some people's in this chamber, particularly Roy's. So, you know, they define us. And actually, Nicola got up in her contribution in the very first part of this debate and said, "Are Labour Party really the party of equality? We've had 2 female prime ministers, you've had none, blah, blah, blah." So it sort of undermines that tact that you want to take there. And the reality is, yes, it's sad actually that we have to call for this now. 12 people in this chamber are female and elected. That's what we're getting at. That ain't right. That ain't right. And actually, yes, it is about individual people, regardless of their background or their gender or whatever. It is about ability. But until there is parity, until there is an acceptance that there is an issue with this, we will never get that parity. There are places in this country, I have been astounded by colleagues across this country have told me about their selection meetings. Young, able women who are dedicated to the Labour Party cause that go for selection, who get picked over by some old white man because he's been in the bloody party for 20 odd years and he mates all the people that go to the selection meeting are his mates from the pub. It ain't right. That happens today. That happens in the Labour Party as well as the Tory Party as well as every other party. And that is the reality. And at one point in recent history, you know, the reserve of being a councillor was universally for either retired or independently wealthy heterosexual white men. That was the reserve only of councillors. In Derby, I think we've made strides. I do. I think we're fairly diverse. We're getting there. But there's far much more to do. And Roy, oh, good God, Roy. I really thought more of you, pal. Honestly, you know, coming in on a debate about women, empowering women, into politics particularly, you talk about the scattering of well-paid female employees we have at this council, as though it's like a panacea, as though it's enough. It's not. And then you talk about sexist remarks made by Churchill in year bloody dot in Parliament that mean nothing. And using the term in between genders. These are the things that we're talking about. These are the things that we've got to work out. Because until we get a situation where we are genuinely representative of the people that we represent, we're all failing.
Councillor Eldrick, wish to sum up?
Not quite sure where to start, Mr. Mayor, to be honest, apart from the fact that, you know, Councillor Webb to start his contribution by saying that politics and women, some people could consider to be a dangerous combination, kind of, you know, set the tone for me. There's only 2 occasions where I consider that to actually be true. One was when we got Margaret Thatcher and the second one was when we got Theresa May. So I think you're partly right, Councillor Webb. I'm actually quite proud to have been selected on an all-women shortlist. I agree with Councillor Stanton that they shouldn't be necessary, but they are necessary. And in my case, I think, you know, we did all right with that all-women shortlist in Darley in 2014. And actually, the women who were there with me on that all-women shortlist were all equally capable. And if any of us had been selected, it would have been good for the people of Derby and good for the people of the city. So I'm not ashamed of the fact that I stood on an all-women shortlist. And I think as long as we need to have them in the Labour Party until we get equal representation. We will keep them because they work and they do improve the numbers of women sitting in this chamber. So that's what I want to say on that. I think Jack's just volunteered to be in the working group, so thank you very much for that, Jack, based on his comments. But I am pleased to see that people will support the working group. I think there are things that we can do which are non-party political, which are about when, after you've got elected, and actually facilitating and supporting women or encouraging them to actually stand in the first place. What I'd like to think is that people watching this debate, that there'd be some women who'd be watching this debate, if anybody's watching now, that will think, wow, you know, they're doing a fantastic job. I don't need to stand. I'm hoping there'll be some women out there who'll be thinking, my God, I'm going to stand because we need to get rid of some of them. And therefore we might see some changes in the 2018 election. But thank you very much for your comments. Mixed emotions, similar to Councillor Russell, but let's get this moving. Let's vote in favour of this motion, and I'm looking forward to working with you all to make some progress.
Okay, so all those in favour of the motion, please show. Any against? Motion's carried.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I understand that the Liberal Democrats have withdrawn motion number 13.
If I'd been asked to speak, I would have explained that was the case because we so positively all approved the one earlier on, which was very similar content.
Thank you.